right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. Next week is World Ocean Week, and we here cannot wait for that time to come. We have an amazing lineup of events coming up with ocean scientists and researchers and explorers from all over the world. We'll be live with penguins in South Africa. We'll be with sea turtles in Nicaragua. We'll be meeting scientists who study manatees and manta rays, and we'll even be going live from an undersea laboratory at the bottom of the ocean. So it's a jam-packed week. We hope you can join us and sign up for some of those events. Before we hit the weekend, though, there is no better way to do that than going live into the field. And we're going to join some ocean-wise educators. We're going to join Saya and Abigail, and we're going to head live to the Shoreline in beautiful British Columbia. And we're going to take a little look at the amazing creatures that we can find by the seashore at low tide. So here we go. Let's head to that beautiful seashore. We've got Saya, we've got Abigail. How are we doing today?
Great. Thanks, Joe. I'd just like to start off by welcoming everyone to Stanley Park, where we're at today, which is in Vancouver, which is the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. And this area actually has a traditional name called Squaihui. And so this was a space that they used for harvesting food and a village site that they would stay at during the summer as well. So just like to acknowledge these areas and those peoples before we get started today. Okay, so we are here at Stanley Park at low tide. So we're going to take a few observations of what we see already here at the beach, making some observations of what is here at the different tidal areas and spots. So we'll just take you in for a closer look and make some observations. So feel free to throw in some comments of what you are noticing here at the beach into the chat, and we'll get started. Okay, so we've got lots of seaweed and kelp all over our shoreline here, as you can see. There's lots of a variety of seaweed that you can find here in Stanley Park. Hopefully, there's a few of you out there that can identify some of the seaweed that we're looking at today. Feel free to throw in something.
Okay, who likes to eat seaweed? I know I do. One of my favorite types of seaweed, not to eat but to look at, is sea lettuce. And you'll probably notice a lot of sea lettuce along the beach here. That's that super light seaweed
We got some in here.
just all over it here. And you notice that super bright green color. Do you know what gives seaweed its super bright green colors? It's actually because it has chlorophyll in its body, just like other plants on land do. So it's pretty cool. And just like plants on land, it actually uses photosynthesis to get its own food. And something that's really cool about photosynthesis is that it actually produces a lot of oxygen for us. So seaweed's a pretty great source for oxygen. And actually, the ocean is one of the biggest sources of oxygen for us. If you think about it, between 60 and 70% of our oxygen actually comes from the ocean. I know, you're probably thinking that forests are going to give us most of our oxygen, but really, underwater forests are where the majority of our oxygen come from. So thank you, sea lettuce, for giving me air to breathe. And it's super cool if you look closer, it's actually attached to this rock really, really well. It doesn't have roots like a normal tree on land would that would dig super, super deep in the soil because the sand is always, or the water is always moving, so it's hard to stay in one place. So they actually attach themselves to rocks so they can stay in one place.
Sorry, Saya and Abigail. I'm just going to jump in for a second. I know you're sharing a microphone today. It's hard to hear.
Oh, so sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll try that again. Okay, did you hear my part about photosynthesis?
It's still just, it's not coming in.
Okay.
I wonder if switching back and forth might be the best option.
Yeah, okay. Is this better,
Okay,
everyone?
that's better. Way better.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm just going to talk a little bit about the seaweed again, just in case you missed it. So something I was talking about was my favorite type of seaweed that I'm seeing on the beach here.
And that's the sea lettuce that we're seeing. That's that super light green seaweed. And the reason that seaweed is green, well, actually, why do you all think seaweed is green? How does it get that awesome green color? You can chat to your friends next to you and maybe think of some different reasons that seaweed might be a beautiful green color. And if you know anything about plants on the land, it's actually a really similar reason as to why plants on land have green colors. And that's because there's chlorophyll in seaweed. And just like plants on land, seaweed actually uses photosynthesis to get all of its food. And the great thing about these plants using photosynthesis to get their food is that it produces a whole ton of oxygen for us humans. And actually, majority of our oxygen comes from the ocean. About 60 to 70% of our oxygen comes from the ocean, which is the best thing ever. So we have the ocean to be grateful for a lot of the oxygen that we breathe. Something else that gives us oxygen from the ocean is phytoplankton. Those are really hard to see with your eyes, though. Cool. Okay, Abigail, I'll pass it back to you.
All right, we're going to take a few more steps further in to our low tide, and we're going to practice some safe beach exploring techniques to use when you're going out at low tide to see if you can find some other ocean animals and critters. So we're going to find a really good rock to turn over, and hopefully we can find a good variety of some animals to look at. Let's try this rock. Okay. So as we go up to look at some rocks at low tide, we're going to carefully turn over the rock and see what we can find. There is also a group already out here today, so we want to make sure that we're practicing these movements to see if we can find some live animals and making sure that we're putting these rocks back to where we picked them up from. So at low tide, there's some really great tide pools and ways that we can find. Oh no, don't do that. These shore crabs are super speedy. And so this is what our shore crabs look like here in Stanley Park. And so I'm just going to hold, you can see them moving around in here. They're quite speedy and really like that coverage under rocks that you can see there. So sometimes if you're able to get a good hold on our shore crabs, you can also check out if they're a male or female crab. And then we've got some really great other creatures here on our rock. So we've got some limpets here, and you can see those barnacles that are holding on as well. Okay, and Asai and I actually made some really great observations of some great examples to show you here on the beach of how we can identify whether a crab is a male or female. So I'm just going to put this rock back over here where I found it, nice and careful. And then we're going to show you some of these crabs that we found earlier to share with everyone.
Okay, I'm going to take over for this part. Okay, so earlier today when we did a quick scan of the beach, we noticed there was a lot of dead crabs. Something that you might expect to see on the beach is different crab molds, but we were actually able to find some crabs that were still in their cells that had died. And luckily enough, we were able to find one male and one female. So if you come a little closer and check out these crabs over here, there's actually one male and one female. Okay, we're going to look at them. And I want you to talk to your partner next to you or your friends in your class, and I want you to think, how do you think that we would be able to distinguish whether it is male or female? I'll give you about 30 seconds to really look and chat about what you think might just differentiate the two. Okay, so the reason or the way that we can tell whether it's a male or a female is actually by looking at their underbellies. Some people think it has to do with size, but actually in this case, the smaller one is the male and the larger one is the female. And the way that I can tell is if you look at this on the bottom of their body, this shape actually can really help us tell.
So the men or the males have a more of a lighthouse shape, so it's skinnier and it's taller, whereas the females have more of a beehive shape. And that's a really great way to tell the difference between the two. So if you can see, this one's wider and it's got more of a beehive shape, and this one is more of a lighthouse. Pretty cool. And I'll flip them over so you can see the other side. Has anyone ever eaten crab before? I'm sure you have. So the way that we can tell when we're fishing for crabs how big they have to be is most fishermen actually will have a little scale to see how big the crab is. And the crabs have to be a certain size. So these crabs obviously too small, but if you get a crab that's bigger, then you're good to eat it, but otherwise you have to put it back into the water. Yeah, but that's pretty cool, eh? They've got their little pinchers here. Okay, we're going to take you a little bit further down the beach to talk about a few more things. Let's see what we've got out here. Let's take a quick scan. Okay, we're going to talk about kelp. We'll come a little bit further down so we can talk about different types of kelp that we might expect to see. And this is actually a really great example of kelp. So kelp is a type of seaweed, and it's really common here in British Columbia, and there's a lot of different types. And something that I was talking about earlier was how these kind of seaweed don't have roots that dig into the soil. Instead, they have something called a holdfast. That's this part right here. And the holdfast actually secures itself onto things like rocks in the ocean so that it doesn't float away. And the holdfast is their root system. It's kind of interesting to see. It kind of looks like roots from a tree, but they're just attached to a rock instead of in the soil. It's pretty cool. And if you look at the beautiful leaves of this kelp, does it look very yummy? Do you want to eat this type of seaweed? Didn't think so. Yeah, so this is a type of kelp, and there's also different types of kelp, like bull kelp in the ocean. I don't see any here today, but bull kelp is really cool because it actually has a little bulb on top of it that's full of air. So that's actually how the top part of the kelp would float. So the bottom would be attached to a rock, and the top part would have a little bulb at the top to keep it floating so that it's always upright. And kelp is pretty amazing. It's actually one of the fastest growing plants in the world. And it grows so fast, in fact, that at Oceanwise, we actually have a team dedicated just to kelp. It's our seaforestation team. And they're doing things like feeding kelp to cattle, and they're doing things like planting kelp at seashores to help with erosion. So kelp is a pretty promising product. And actually, you might be surprised, there's kelp in a lot of different things that you eat and things that you might put on your skin. For example, there's kelp products in ice cream. What? I know. There's kelp in ice cream. There's even kelp in things like moisturizers and different skincare products. So kelp is really all around you. So we need to protect the kelp so that it helps you. Okay, Abigail. What should we do next? Ooh, yeah. Okay. We have this very cool water testing kit from the Water Rangers. So they have two different types of testing kits they gifted us. This one is for ocean water and for salt water. And there's also one for freshwater. So if you live near a Great Lake, then maybe you could get a freshwater testing kit and test the water in that area. Okay, I'll pop my kit open and get my things. We're going to test for two things today. We're going to test for salinity in the water, and we're also going to check for dissolved oxygen in the water. So I think we'll start with dissolved oxygen. Well, don't drop it. So there's a couple of things in my kit. There are my ampules, which are going to help me tell how much oxygen is in the kit. There is a beaker, a timer, and there is a reference scale here to see how much oxygen it is. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go out to the water, and I'm going to get a little bit of water in my beaker, and I'm going to fill it up. Actually, Abigail's going to get some water in the beaker, and I'm going to prepare the ampules. So the ampules look like this. They are glass, and I have to pull one out. They're really in there. And this is my favorite part when we test them. Okay, so we got a water sample. And if you look at this ampule, at the bottom, there's a little part that's actually just going to break off. So I'm going to put it in the water, and I'm going to push it against there, and all of the liquid that was in here is going to enter the ampule. And so what I'm going to do now is flip over my timer. And when that timer is up, we're then going to check our reference guide to see how much oxygen is in the water. Can you think of why it's important to know how much oxygen is in the water? Maybe have a discussion with your friends next to you to think about, why does it matter if there's oxygen in the water? What might that be important for? And when might there be more oxygen than other times? Thinking about this area, can you make some assumptions? How much oxygen do you think is in this water? What factors do you think vary or make that vary? Okay, so oxygen in water is important for a couple of reasons. One of the reasons being is because the animals that are in the water actually need that oxygen to survive, because just like you, they need oxygen. Some things that might factor into how much oxygen is in the water is the time of year, the weather. So for example, if it's summer, there might be less oxygen in the water because there is a lot of evaporation happening. And also, some things that might be happening is a lot of upwelling. So if there's a lot of upwelling, there's more oxygen in the water. Pretty cool. Okay, should we check back and see if we're almost ready to see how much oxygen? We're just about done. So this is our scale here. I'll show it to you. So obviously 1 is the least amount of oxygen and 12 is the most. And you can kind of tell by how dark the ampules get. So I'll show you our progress so far and how ours looks. It looks pretty dark so far. And we're almost up to our time. Okay, I'm going to be a bit of a cheater. I'm going to pull it out early. Okay, I think it's pretty dark. I think it might be, sorry. I got to get a better look. It's pretty high. I would think it's around a 6 right now. Do you agree? It's kind of hard to tell for you, but I think it's around a 6. Yeah, so this water is pretty oxygenated, but obviously some different things could factor into that. Okay, I'm going to put this back, and I'm going to make sure that if I use this testing kit, I don't dump this right back into the ocean, because there is actually glass in here, and we want to be careful about us putting garbage into the ocean, of course, and we don't want to harm any of the animals. Okay, Abigail is now going to do a test on how the salinity of the water is. So we're going to trade off.
All right, I'm gonna get back into this handy dandy Water Ranger backpack and find our salinity tester. And this is our other, I guess we don't need to use a tub if we're just gonna. Okay, so we're going to turn on our salinity monitor here. This is a version of what a salinity tester can look like. They come in a variety of different testers, but can anyone guess or know in the chat what the salinity would mean for our ocean animals and why we would be testing it? We'll give that a moment. We'll get this ready to go out into the water and test it out. Okay. We'll get into a good space here. I might have to go a little bit further than Kieran. Any guesses of what our salinity might be out here in Stanley Park? Give that a moment. Gonna bring it in so you can get a closer look. So I don't think it's moving anymore. So it's around 18.5. Any comments or guessing if 18.5 is a pretty regular salinity testing or if that is above average or below? All right. We'll get back to our drier area over here. What you got there? Oh. All right, so we are at a pretty good time now for our class if they have any questions or comments or anything that they'd like us to go back to get another look at.
All right, excellent. Well, we do have Mr. Shattuck's crew, grade 6, 7s, hanging out from Chalk River. If you are tuning in via YouTube, I can see there's a couple groups there. Use that chat sidebar, and you can send in any questions you have for Saya or Abigail as they explore the tides. Let's see if there's a couple questions here, Mr. Shattuck's crew.
So, I was wondering, how much salt could a freshwater fish survive in?
That's a really good question.
Oh, sorry, I don't have the mic.
Oh, just, I was like, do you know? Because I'm.
Oh, I do not know. So it really depends on the animal. And there's actually some animals that can survive in freshwater and in saltwater. Do you know the animal that can survive in freshwater and saltwater?
Can we do the mic switch? Unfortunately, it doesn't.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. No big deal. It likes it much better when it's in the air.
Sorry about that, team. Technical difficulties. Okay, so there are a few animals that can actually survive in saltwater and in freshwater. And I'm not really sure the threshold of if a freshwater animal was to enter a saltwater system, what or how much saltwater they could take. So that's a great question, but I don't actually know the answer. But going back to animals that can be in saltwater and in and in freshwater system, can anyone think of any fish or any things that could be in freshwater and in the ocean? There's two big ones that come to mind when I think of them.
I can think
Any
of one,
guesses?
and it's a very, very cool shark is the one I'm thinking of.
Yeah, exactly. A bull shark. So bull sharks, they're one of my favorite types of sharks. They can actually swim in the ocean, and they can also enter freshwater systems through rivers. Because I'm not sure how much you know about water systems, but basically, rivers, they flow into the ocean. So that is an access portal for the bull sharks to enter freshwater systems. So sometimes in places like Australia, you will actually see bull sharks in freshwater systems. Kind of crazy. We're the only shark that can do that. Another thing that does that is salmon. We love salmon out here in BC, and lots of different salmon can do that. Okay, next question.
Any more questions from our sevens before recess? We have recess soon.
How many animals live there?
I think, are you asking how many animals you might find at low tide?
Yeah.
Okay, very cool.
That's a great question, and it's hard to count with our hands how many animals there are here because sure, we can see lots of different animals, but there's a lot of things that we cannot see that are maybe too small for us to see, or they're hiding just under the sand. So there's a lot of things that like to burrow in the sand, things like different types of clams that like to go into the sand. So it's really hard for us to count because there could be thousands and maybe even millions.
Yeah, so nature doesn't cooperate exactly when you want it to. So what are some other examples of other times you've been out in this area, some other creatures you've seen in the tide pools?
Oh, I think Abigail's gonna take that one. She's had lots of experience here.
Yeah, so in Stanley Park, we typically come across a variety of sea stars. So we have a mottled sea star, leather sea star, not leatherback, that's a turtle. Leather sea star. We've even found some brittle stars once, so that was very exciting. And then there's all of our shore crabs. We saw those tiny Dungeness crabs today that we were identifying. There's a lot of the really tinier bugs. I believe they're called isopods.
Yeah.
Isopods, lots of those. And we've got a great variety of sea snails that like to hang out here. All of those barnacles are animals, and there are even, I believe they're called tube worms that attach to our rocks here as well. So a really great variety of animals, as well as those clams and mussels and oysters that we can find along the shore here. All right. Any last
Hey,
questions?
I think Mr. Shattuck's crew is heading out for recess. Let's
Recess.
say goodbye. Thanks for hanging out with
Thank
us,
you so
crew.
much.
Have a good weekend.
Good weekend.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right. So I'm itching to know, you took the salinity measurement. So does the measurement 18, you said, I think it was 18.5. Is that low? Is that high? Where does that fall in our ocean salinity?
I think that's actually right around its like the neutral. Is that on the spectrum, the line? So that's what we would expect of the salinity here. So that's quite normal.
And then what are some things that could affect ocean salinity? Why might one area have more salt than another area?
That's a great question. I think I'm going to throw this back to Saya.
It's so nice working in a team. We can just pass things back and forth. So salinity it depends on a lot of things. Like I was talking about with temperature, it's similar, right? So it depends on the time of year. So when we see a lot of evaporation happening in the summer, the water might be more salty just because there's less water in the system. Some other things that also make a difference is upwelling. So if they're in an area that doesn't have a lot of upwelling, then there's not going to be a whole lot of salinity on the top layers, but there might be on the bottom layers. And I don't know if you are familiar with that word that I'm using, upwelling. That's just basically when water from the bottom of the ocean kind of works its way to that top. All that really, really cold water can come all the way up to the top. And all that cold water on the bottom has so many nutrients. And areas where there's lots of upwelling happening, that's where we expect to see a lot of different productivity. Because when all that nutrient dense water comes up, that's when all the phytoplankton can start feeding on all the delicious things they like to eat. And when there's more phytoplankton, zooplankton, since they're the base of the food chain, all those other things will then eat the plankton, and that area is probably an area that's thriving and doing really well. So upwelling is a really great way to kind of see where productivity is happening. And sometimes there's plankton blooms that you can even see from space. So plankton are so tiny, most times you can't even see them with your naked eye. But there are millions of plankton blooming at one time in the ocean at times. So if you are in the International Space Station looking down, you might even see a plankton bloom from space.
All right, very cool. I can see Mr. Hancock's crew has joined us backstage. If as this is going on, Mr. Hancock, if you guys have a question, feel free to type in the private chat and I'll know to bring your crew in. But what I think we'll do now is just update as well, because I know a few groups have just joined us. I see more groups joining us on YouTube. So we are in Stanley Park. We are with the Ocean Wise crew. We've got Saya and we have Abigail joining us. And we've looked at some seaweed, some kelp. I think we saw some limpets on the bottom of the rock and barnacles. We saw some crabs. So that's kind of where we are right now. We did a few tests as well to look at the salinity of the water.
If you want, we can go back over and look back at a few things that we went over before.
Yeah, why don't we check a couple tide pools while we're here? I think that would be neat to see if anything.
So maybe we can touch back on some of those crabs, that we can talk a little bit more about those. And there's also some things that we're seeing over here.
Okay,
so
perfect.
If you look over here, there's this rock right here. We're going to see if there's anything cool under it. Okay, not so much, but there are a few little bugs and things and barnacles. Does anyone know how barnacles eat? Just like you, they have to eat, and they don't get to just walk to their fridge and pick whatever is in there and have a delicious sandwich for lunch. They have to work pretty hard. So barnacles have this circular shape, and then on top of it, they have a shield that kind of covers their body. When they're hungry, they open up their shield and they use their feet to find food. And they go like this in the water. And when things kind of swing by, they can catch onto them and bring them back down to their bodies and eat. So that's how barnacles eat. It's a little bit different than how we would eat, but it's still pretty cool. Okay, let's try and find another rock that seems cool. Maybe we'll head a little bit further up the tidal zone to see if there's something cool that we can show you. Or our crabs have disappeared. Okay, I'm picking this rock right here. Oh, come here. Look what I found. A sea snail. Do you see this right here? So right now it's attached to this rock and it's just chilling. And I also saw a crab around here somewhere, but I can't, I think it's scurried away. The people who have been on since earlier, they definitely saw how slippery these crabs can be and how, oh, I see him. He's right in there. Oh, there they are. There's a few of them. And just a reminder, if you're ever at a beach and you're doing some beach walking and trying to figure or find some things, if you lift a rock, just make sure you put it back where it was, because these animals, it's their home. And if you come over here, Kieran, you can actually see a crab right here. Right here. Okay, what is something on the beach that you'd expect to find on the beach, but probably shouldn't be on the beach? You can type that in the chat, or you can just chat with your friends next to you in class. What are some things on the beach that shouldn't be on the beach, but we often see on the beach? I'm sure most of you guessed it, and it's plastic. So a lot of the times when we're doing beach walks like this, we see a lot of different types of garbage on the beach, which is really unfortunate because that can harm a lot of the animals that are living in this area. So if we look around, actually, since the tide is out, it's a little bit hard to see plastic here, but usually at the tidal line over there, that's where we'll see lots of plastic. So we have to be really careful about where we're putting our garbage and where it's ending up, because even though you are in somewhere that's very far from the ocean, you have river systems in your community that actually connect you back to the ocean, meaning that any plastic will actually end up in the ocean. So if I'm correct, where you are, the water will, or the ocean that you're closest to is probably going to be the Hudson's Bay area, and then eventually the Arctic Ocean. So you have to be really careful about what you're doing with your garbage and where you're putting it, because otherwise the animals might be harmed. But yeah.
Okay, I've got Mr. Hancock's crew, and they do have a question. They're not sure if it was answered already, but we're going to bring them in, and we'll find out.
That's a perfect segue. We were curious. We're nowhere near the ocean. We're in Ontario. Aside from not littering and taking care of our garbage, recycling, what else could we do here in Ontario that would help you out?
That's a great question. So I know it's something that we realize is that being far from the ocean, you can often feel very disconnected from it. So we do programs like this to kind of build awareness, because I find the more people that know about the ocean, the more they'll care about it, right? So I try and make sure that I teach as many youth as possible around the country things that they can see in the ocean so that they have more of a relationship with it and that they can try and want to protect it more. But something that we do a lot of the times, even in Ontario, is ocean-wise beach cleanups. Obviously, there's no oceans near you, but if there is a lake near you or a river system or even a Great Lake, you can sign up with Oceanwise to do a shoreline cleanup and see what kinds of plastic you're finding at the shore in your community, because you have to remember all water systems are just as important as the ocean. So lakes, if they're dirty, they're also going to affect all the animals in the lakes. But yeah, I hope that helps. So keeping your areas clean, recycling, and all that stuff you were talking about. But yeah, shoreline cleanups are a great option. And actually, another one for the older students, you can write to your local leaders and encourage them to take more greener routes. So for example, in a lot of communities in BC, single-use plastics have been banned in communities. So things like single-use plastics at grocery stores and plastic forks and all that stuff. So you can bug all the local leaders in your area to make your community a greener one. And we can certainly help you with that if you need some help.
Okay. And so right now you're down, it's low tide. How much longer do you have before the tide starts coming back in?
Oh, I see it's slowly creeping up, but we've got some more time for questions. I'm
Okay.
not sure what time it is now, but yeah, we've got a few more minutes. If you have any more questions for us, I'd love to help.
Okay. And then I wonder, so the tide pools, there are obviously spots where other creatures would come to take advantage of the tide going out. So are there predators or other creatures that use this time to come and hunt on the beach?
Absolutely. Something that we see often are seagulls. I haven't seen any yet today, but a lot of the time seagulls will use this time because obviously they can't go very deep in the water to see what is in those tide pools to come and eat and find a really good lunch. Abby, do you want to add more to that?
Just to add there, even as we've been exploring and checking out the area, we've seen some other birds come into this area, like the geese that you can see back here. They're taking advantage. There is a seagull there. And earlier, there were even some crows picking around in all of the seaweed covered rocks. So just an example of some of those other predators that take advantage of our low tide.
All right. And then some advice for students who maybe they live close enough where they do have somewhere with high and low tides that they can explore. What kind of equipment or kind of precautions would you suggest for exploring the tidal zone?
Yeah, absolutely. So checking out the times for high and low tides is a really great way to start. So finding when the low tide starts, so you can really take advantage of all of the shore that is exposed during that time. Proper footwear is a great one, making sure that we're protected. So sunglasses, hats, sunscreen, and like a few of our tips that Sai and I went over today of when we're exploring, rolling over those rocks, being super gentle and careful so that we're not harming any of the live animals around us, and then putting that rock right back to where we found it so that they are able to enjoy their homes and their space just like they were before. We definitely recommend cleaning up any of those plastic or garbage that you find, but in a very safe and protected way with gloves or tongs and using all of those protective measures and making sure that you have someone older along with you as well.
All right. I can see some kids enjoying the low tide behind
Yeah,
tide pool and turning over some rocks. So
definitely.
whenever I visit, I have a friend out on the West Coast, and whenever I visit, we always go out tide pooling, and we find amazing things ranging from octopus to bat stars and all kinds of things. So I'm wondering if each of you have a favorite find, something that you found while tide pooling that stands out or is rare or you're really excited that you came across it.
Absolutely. Okay, I'll go first since I have the mic right now. I actually, it's very rare for me to come across sea stars when I'm exploring during low tide. So whenever I come across a sea star, that is very exciting for me. Especially the purple ochre sea star. That one's my favorite. Then I'll pass it over to Saya.
I also love seeing sea stars because, again, like Abby was saying, it's kind of rare to see sea stars for us. So we like to see sea stars a lot. And not necessarily in this part of Vancouver, but whenever I'm on the island, I love when I go to tide pools and I see different sea anemones. That's my favorite sea creature. So anytime I see a sea anemone, I am a very happy person.
All right, very cool. Well, this has been a great way to end Friday as we make our way towards World Ocean Week to spend some time in Vancouver, in Stanley Park at low tide, and investigating the ocean. So, Abigail and Saya, thank you so much. And a shout out to the OceanWise team for making this event possible and bringing it together. A shout out to our classrooms. I know we had some tuning in via YouTube. We had a few classrooms sneak into camera spots on and off during the live event. So thank you for being flexible with the time change during the day. And a shout out to everybody for next week. World Ocean Day is coming. The best thing I think you can do is to learn something new about the ocean, explore it in some way. And I think a good way to do that is to join us for one of our live events next week. We have so much going on. We hope to see your classrooms there. Sai and Abigail, thank you so much. I'm sure at OceanWise, you have a lot going on next week too.
Yeah, we sure do. We have lots of different cleanups happening and lots of different events going on. But thank you so much for giving us some of your time today. I know there was a bit of a mix-up, so I'm really glad that you all got to see what we're doing. And I hope that one day you can come visit and see for yourself.
All right, excellent. Well, enjoy the rest of your tide pooling. Enjoy the weekend, and we look forward to our next OceanWise event.
Thanks so much, everyone.
All right, thanks, everyone.